Welcome to Cooking with Whole Grains. My name is Victoria Faoro, and I look forward to sharing some ideas for using these nutritious ingredients in your cooking. We'll look at grains in general, and then look at some specific recipes. Full recipes will be included at the end of the video. Almost all grains are the dried, seed-bearing fruits of grasses. Each kernel of grain is enclosed by a thin layer of bran, which protects it. Inside the kernel is a germ or seed, surrounded by a packet of starch called the endosperm, which would nourish the young embryo if the seed sprouted. Some grains like rice, barley, and oats have an additional inedible outermost husk called the hull, which is not shown here. As you can see here, the majority of nutrition in a grain is found in the bran and germ. When a grain is refined or milled, such as when rice is refined to produce white rice, only the endosperm is retained, so the nutrition is significantly reduced, as well as the fiber. A milled grain may then be enriched, but that means that just a few specific nutrients are added back in. These are only a fraction of the nutrients available in whole grains, and no fiber is added back in. So it's healthiest to use whole grains rather than milled grains whenever possible, even though they may take a little bit longer to cook. For convenience, many recipes call for milled grains to shorten the cooking time. For healthier meals, it's simple to make substitutions. For example, you can use brown rice when a recipe calls for white rice. Just select the same type of brown rice for the recipe, indica or japonica, long grain that cooks up fluffy, or medium or short grain, which cooks up stickier. As you can see here, both are available as brown rice. Measure out the amount of uncooked rice called for in the recipe. If the recipe calls for cooked rice, or for rice that's served separately, you just need to allow enough time for cooking the whole grain rice. If raw rice is being added to other ingredients, you can parboil the whole grain until it's slightly tender but far from done, about 12 minutes for brown rice. Drain and then use it in place of the white rice. You can even parboil it in advance and refrigerate it until you need it. It will be fluffy or creamy, just as the white rice would be. One way to make cooking with any long cooking whole grain faster is to parboil or fully cook large quantities in advance and freeze them in measured out packages so you can quickly grab one from the freezer when making a recipe. Just be sure to label the package, including whether the grain is parboiled or fully cooked, and of course, the date. Some whole grains are quick cooking, with no parboiling, including the currently popular quinoa, one of the few grains that provide a complete protein to your diet, providing all 9 essential amino acids. Quinoa is actually a seed rather than a fruit-bearing seed, but it is still considered a grain. I use tricolor, which includes white, red, and black quinoa, and I also keep on hand some plain white, which is sometimes referred to as yellow. Quinoa and fresh corn with scallions is a dish that we really enjoy as a salad, a side, or even a light meal. Here I've made it with white quinoa, which cooks up very light and fluffy. Red and black quinoa are both a bit nuttier in flavor and tend to be crunchier, especially the black. As you can see, the recipe doesn't involve a lot of ingredients and includes a second grain, corn. If you're using fresh sweet corn, you'll need to husk it. It's easy to pull the husk and silk off, but sometimes the process frustrates people. You can use your microwave to make it easier. Just put the ear in the microwave with the husk on, microwave for 2 minutes, and then remove it, being careful to use a thick towel or pot holder to protect your hands. It will be hot. Cut the bottom end off and then squeeze the ear out. The silk will stay in the husk. It works really well, but I have to admit that I still do it the old-fashioned way. It was one of my jobs as a child. However you husk your corn, the next step is to remove kernels from the ears of corn. It works great to set a small bowl upside down inside a larger bowl. Cut a piece off the bottom of the ear to make it flat, and stand the ear of corn on the small bowl, and just cut down the ear to remove the kernels, which will fall into the larger bowl. This is a safe and neat way to cut the kernels off. If I'm using fresh sweet corn, I often make my own broth for this dish by throwing the cobs and a few pieces of carrot, celery, scallions, or onions in the pot with 2 cups of water and a little salt and pepper, and perhaps a few sprigs of parsley. I bring this to a boil and then simmer for about 20 minutes and strain. You can also use purchased broth. Just try to keep it reduced sodium. If you decide to use a purchased stock or broth, you can milk the cobs to add flavor. Simply run the back of a knife down the cob, pressing as you go, scraping juice from the cob into the broth. Cook the quinoa in the broth and drain it if it has not absorbed all of the broth. Sauté the scallions and corn kernels and toss these sautéed vegetables with the quinoa. You can add crumbled feta cheese if desired, and serve. Quinoa is also very tasty when roasted. This very flavorful recipe roasts it with potatoes. The recipe doesn't involve unusual ingredients, and it's very easy to make. Potato chunks and garlic are covered with water and brought to a boil, at which point quinoa is added. The two continue to cook until the potatoes can barely be pierced with a fork. The mixture is drained in a fine mesh strainer, and a half cup of the cooking water is kept. The mixture is then spread out on a well-oiled baking sheet or in a baking pan. Everything will still be quite wet. Drizzle with the reserved cooking liquid and season with salt and pepper and roast. When the potatoes are tender, add these ingredients. First add the scallions and chili and toss. Then sprinkle the cheese over everything and return to the oven until the cheese is melted and bubbling. Sprinkle with parsley and serve. Here I've made it with white quinoa. This very flavorful dish reheats very well in a microwave. And keep in mind that you can roast quinoa on its own and then sprinkle it on salads, soups, or other dishes to add protein and other nutrients. I'm going to share one additional recipe that makes the most of the way quinoa becomes crisp. It's in a pan-fried patty that you can eat on its own or on a bun. It's flavored with cheese, scallions, and tarragon or dill. You'll be surprised how much you enjoy this vegetarian burger. Panko breadcrumbs are added to a beaten egg and given time to absorb the liquid. Tarragon or dill is chopped. Here I'm chopping tarragon. When I chop herbs, I bundle them into a mound and then slice through them multiple times. After that, it's easier to chop them further. Quinoa is cooked. Instructions are given in the recipe. Scallions are finely chopped. I always cut scallions in half so I can chop white and green at the same time. I thinly slice them and then chop them finely. These ingredients and shredded cheese are added. I like the flavor that smoked Gouda brings to the patties. Shape the mixture into 4 balls. I put them on a plate and then flatten them, pressing firmly to help them stay together. They can then be lifted and placed in a hot skillet. Pan fry for 4 to 5 minutes on one side and then turn and fry on the other side for about the same amount of time. You want some good crusting for flavor and to help hold them together. Since there's raw egg in them, I use my thermometer to be sure that they reach 160 degrees, which will make them safe to eat. You can serve them plain or with your favorite sauce. I added a sauce of yogurt, lemon juice, garlic, and tarragon. You could also mix mayonnaise with an herb. The patties could also be served in a bun with lettuce and tomato. I like to keep a little extra cooked quinoa in the refrigerator to add a little protein to salads and other dishes. Extra cooked grains need never go to waste. Amaranth is another seed grain that's very high in protein. It's even smaller than quinoa and retains some crunch even when it's cooked in water. In this recipe, it adds nutrition and crunch to griddlecakes. This recipe also includes some stone-ground cornmeal, another grain. Amaranth is added to boiling water and cooked for about 15 minutes. It's then added to a beaten egg. The remaining ingredients are whisked in, along with a small amount of milk, to make a medium-thick batter, like a pancake batter. Batter is spooned into a hot skillet and fried just as you would make other griddle cakes. You'll need to flip them once. In all, they take about 5 minutes to cook. They're great right out of the pan, but you can wrap them in foil and keep them warm in a hot oven set at the lowest temperature. They can be served with a yogurt sauce for dipping or served for sopping up gravies and sauces. Bulgur is a whole grain I cook with a lot. It's especially easy to cook because you simply put the grain in a bowl or pan, add boiling water, cover it, and let it sit. This refreshing salad with lemon and dill is a great side, but can also become a one-dish meal with the addition of shrimp or other seafood. I like using red whole grain bulgur. While the bulgur is cooking, I toast sliced almonds in a dry skillet and remove the seeds from cucumbers. A melon baller works well for that task. I remove thick stems from the arugula. You could use other sturdy greens if you prefer. When I'm preparing many ingredients for a salad, I often combine the ones that will be added together in a refrigerator dish with a lid so I can easily slide them into the refrigerator until I need them. I like to keep all ingredients refrigerated as much as possible during the process. Remove dill from stems and chop, and add to a mixture of lemon juice and olive oil for the dressing. By then the bulgur should be ready. Mix the chopped vegetables, dressing, and bulgur together. Add cooked seafood if you wish. Sprinkle with the toasted almonds and serve. With seafood added, this makes a beautiful one-dish meal for any time of day. Bulgur is a great substitute for meat. It gives bulk and texture to dishes. What looks like cooked ground beef in this vegetarian chili is actually the same red bulgur. The recipe section at the end of this video provides information about my earlier video that includes the recipe for vegetarian chili. Pearl, or pearled barley, is technically not a whole grain because the polishing or pearling process removes the bran to make it cook more quickly. I've included it because this processing does not remove some important nutrients, and a 1/4 cup serving provides 20 to 35% of a person's daily recommended fiber. Barley and white bean salad with parsley and caper sauce is a satisfying and nutritious salad that once again can also serve as an entree. The dressing includes parsley, capers, garlic, olive oil, and lemon juice. The dressing ingredients are processed in a small food processor or a blender. The barley is cooked in boiling water and drained. Combine the barley with drained and rinsed cannellini beans, which are white kidney beans. Any white bean could be used. You could also cook dried beans for the recipe. The dressing is added to the barley and beans. I like to use small tomatoes for this recipe, so I halve or quarter them. It's best to serve the salad on a bed of lettuce, as the crunchy lettuce really enhances the salad. If you prefer, instead of using small tomatoes, you could use sliced large tomatoes and serve the salad on a bed of lettuce topped with the tomato slices. You can also add other ingredients. In this case, I added some thinly sliced scallions. The salad is as versatile as it is delicious. Almost any whole grains can be combined with rice or used on their own as a base for stir-fries. This is a quick way to make a stir-fry type meal with any vegetables on hand. I'm giving you a recipe for a mustard stir-fry sauce, but you could also use a purchased sauce, and the vegetables could be a frozen stir-fry mixture. A key ingredient in the sauce is stone ground mustard, a coarse mustard. A country-style mustard would also work. If you need to use a regular mustard, I would start with about half the amount and then add some more if needed for flavor. The ingredients are shaken in a jar. I cut up vegetables on hand and use a combination of cooked grains on hand or in my freezer. Here I'm using brown rice and tricolored quinoa. Once again, I've put my cut vegetables in a refrigerator container so I can keep them chilled if I'm cutting them well in advance. What is a little different about this recipe is that the vegetables are put in a skillet with a small amount of water and steamed. We start with the longer cooking vegetables. You could also steam them in a steamer. When the longer cooking vegetables begin to soften, add the ones that cook more quickly, like squash. Then add the mustard sauce and toss it with the vegetables while the pan is still on the heat. If desired, you could even toss in the grains, or you can serve the vegetables separately over the grains. Here I'm serving the vegetables over the grains. I've also toasted some cashews in a dry skillet and garnished the dish with these. You can really use any grains, vegetables, and garnishes for this dish, and cooked meat or seafood could also be added. It's a wonderful way to quickly use whole grains. We really enjoy serving stir-fry on winter wheat. A wheat berry contains reasonable amounts of 22 known vitamins and minerals, a high-quality protein, and dietary fiber. The proportions of these nutrients to calories make the wheat berry a nutrient-dense food. It takes about 45 minutes to cook, but it's well worth the time. On the left are some extra cooked wheat berries. When I cook these, I always cook extra to use on its own or in combination with other grains. These grains freeze very well. This is a combination I use a lot. The winter wheat gives body and chewiness, and the quinoa absorbs sauces and dressings and clings to ingredients. The result is that every bite of the dish is flavorful. There are many other delicious grains and recipes. Some of my other videos feature recipes you might like to use. My Meatless Mediterranean cooking video includes a spring salad made with farro, a very delicious whole grain. My Making Foods for Giving Part 1 video includes a recipe for the vegetarian chili I mentioned earlier that uses bulgur in place of ground meat. It has a texture surprisingly similar to meat and is very nutritious. That same video includes 2 recipes for granola that feature rolled or old-fashioned oats. One is a savory snack and the other a great breakfast treat. Once you make your own granola, you won't want to go back to buying it. In my video Making Foods for Giving Part 2, a separate video, there's a recipe for power cookies, which include more rolled oats than flour, along with nuts and raisins. These cookies are better than any health bar. Following are full recipes for the dishes presented in this video. Remember, you can pause the video at any point to photograph the recipe. Here is the recipe for quinoa and fresh corn with scallions, adapted from a recipe in Deborah Madison's Vegetarian Cooking for Everyone. This is the recipe for potatoes with roasted quinoa and cheese, adapted from a recipe in Mark Bittman's book, How to Cook Everything Vegetarian. This recipe for quinoa patties was adapted from a recipe in Christopher Kimball's book, Cookish, Throw It Together. Here is the recipe for amaranth griddlecakes, adapted from a recipe in Mark Bittman's book, How to Cook Everything Vegetarian. This recipe for bulgur salad with lemon and dill was adapted from a recipe by Angela Carter on the website joyfulscribblings.com. Here's the recipe for barley and white bean salad with parsley caper dressing, adapted from a recipe in Jack Bishop's book, A Year in a Vegetarian Kitchen. This last recipe for quick steamed vegetables and grains with honey mustard stir-fry sauce is adapted from a recipe in Lorna Sass's book, Whole Grains for Busy People. Thank you for your interest in cooking with more whole grains. Below are some links you might be interested in.